First You Think is a not-for-profit ministry of the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Support us at ucdsm.org today.
I have at one point or another in my life been dad to 11 different children. And I'm here to say in that role that the value of resistance is sometimes overrated. I fantasize about preaching about compliance. Now, before you kick me out, I feel like I should explain some obvious things first. I truly hope we can all agree here there are morally clear times to resist. We must resist fascism, white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, environmental destruction, just to name a few of the present evils in this world. Yes, of course, obviously, we resist, we should resist. But as a dad, I could use less resistance to turning off the TV for dinner. When your child is rolling on the floor screaming because they want just one more episode of SpongeBob, you develop a hunger for compliance. But that sermon is for another day, because this January we are exploring the value of practicing resistance. And I think Unitarian Universalism's long commitment to social justice helps us understand pretty quickly what we mean when we say practicing resistance. It's in our congregation's DNA. It's supporting the women's suffrage movement in 1908. It's the Reverend Curtis Reese's leadership here with religious humanism in 1917. It's our own member Edna Griffin leading a sit-in at Katz Deli in 1948. It is our very own Reverend Mark Stringer's officiating of the first legally recognized same-gender marriage in 2007. It is our ongoing Trans Lives Festival. These are practices of resistance, and we understand what that means. It means showing up for love and the flourishing of all people. It means that when policies or actions harm or suppress an identity or group, we resist. We lift these moments up in our congregational history because they're such morally clear examples of good resistance. Preaching about practicing resistance to Unitarian Universalists is like preaching about the value of cheese in Wisconsin. So a kid screaming about wanting more TV is an example of bad resistance. It is resistance, to be sure, but there's no moral claim behind it. It's just, I want. It's a desire to keep filling a craving, and I get it. It's actually painful to stop the dopamine rush of cartoons. Crying about turning off the TV is resistance, but that's not what we mean in Unitarian Universalist communities about practicing resistance. The problem is the word is too big. Maybe it helps to think of resistance as like a spectrum of behavior. So marching for women's right to vote is a gold standard resistance. Rolling on the floor because you want more TV goes on the other side. But there's actually far worse on this side of the spectrum. Timothy McVeigh was an American citizen, an Army vet who held a moral opposition to a powerfully centralized federal government. Fine, I've known decent libertarians who favor a limited central government. But McVeigh saw the government's actions at Ruby Ridge and then at Waco as evidence that a Rubicon line had been crossed, and he now had a moral obligation to resist. So he blew up a federal building in Oklahoma City, April 19th, 1995, and murdered 168 people. Was McVeigh holding his moral ground against a government that had gone off the rails into tyranny? Or was he a terrorist? Well, it was a textbook definition of terrorism, blowing up a building and killing that many people. So that's not resistance, right? On this side, marches, sit-ins, weddings, festivals. On this side, bombings. Is resistance only bad, then, when it's violent? Well, if I'm going to be brutally honest, as an Irishman, I'm a little less quick to judge the IRA for their horrific bombings. I'm not defending them. I'm just saying that parliamentary procedures were not going to get them anywhere. As an abolitionist, I'm a little less quick to judge John Brown for bombing Harper's Ferry. As an anti-fascist, I'm a lot less quick to judge the Allied forces for their horrific bombings across Nazi Germany. In these cases, the bombing violates my theology, my commitment to love. But the people dropping the bombs are fighting the people who committed themselves to the destruction of a people. So bombs are bad, but at least we're working for the liberation of an oppressed people. I don't know. I like this conversation better when it was really obvious, when it was civil rights and tantrums. But the reality is that we live in a very complex world. So I'd love to preach about how obvious it is that we should resist, but I want the question that drives us today to be this: when is resistance holding the moral ground? And when is resistance just a stubbornness, a resistance to grow and change? The hard truth is that everybody makes a moral argument for the resistance. No one twists their mustache at the end of the day saying, "Behold my evil plans." That's just in cartoons. I resist the pro-life movement's actions because I believe women have a choice over their own health care and bodies. But the argument from the pro-life movement also has a moral claim that they are siding with love, that they are working to stop violence against the not yet born child. I support mandatory vaccines because I think we have a moral obligation to keep one another safe from preventable diseases, and not incidentally, I don't want polio. But the side opposing mandatory vaccines believes that people should have a choice over their own health care and bodies. Now, dang it, that was my argument for pro-choice. The longer I think about it, the more I realize that the story of noble resistance gets adopted by anyone who is pushing against the status quo. Because everyone wants to think that they are holding the moral ground. I assure you, ICE agents go to bed at night believing they are saving America. And anybody, just about, can make a good enough sounding argument. Here's a horrific case in point. Quote, "We will preserve and defend the basic principles upon which our nation has been built." That's a moral argument. Was that from Abraham Lincoln or Adolf Hitler? It wasn't Lincoln. If we are to take seriously our Unitarian Universalist calling to practice resistance rooted in our covenantal values, then we need a better way to tell if we're resisting with love at the center, or if we're just stubbornly fighting for our own interests. We make these kinds of moral arguments to justify our resistance because, well, we tend to see ourselves as the heroes in the story, right? We're Frodo in The Lord of the Rings. And here's the thing, as Unitarian Universalists in America, we are doubly cloaked in stories of heroic resistance. The first cloak, being an American. American colonists resisted the king who set awful taxes, quartered soldiers, suppressed free speech. The immigrants who came to America to resist the oppressive religious or political climates in the home country. Now, of course, these first stories were white male landowner stories, but they set in place a climate where resistance was a kind of foundational moral obligation, not a threat to the peace. That's one cloak. The other cloak, Unitarians and Universalists, founded in resistance, kicked out of big church's table almost immediately. Our roots are in congregationalism, pushing back against any sort of ecclesiastical authority. We don't want bishops. Congregations have all of the power in Unitarian Universalism. You ordain, hire, and fire ministers, and frankly, half of Unitarian Universalist congregations are doing just fine without a full-time minister. We do have a Unitarian Universalist association, but it supports congregations. It doesn't govern them. Now, you can try as a Catholic to be a resistor, a disruptor, but let me know how that goes for you. It's not going to go well. By contrast, in Unitarian Universalism, we are the inheritors of resistance. It is our default way of engaging with the world. So as American Unitarian Universalists, we are doubly cloaked in the story of heroic resistance. On our best days, that means that we are the first out of the gate to show up for the oppressed. On our worst days, it means we hurt one another and call it resistance. When the Celebrant team met to discuss this theme of practicing resistance, we arrived at the hard realization that resistance is actually morally neutral. Previous months, like gratitude is pretty much always a good practice. But resistance, it's complicated. It depends on your moral compass. It depends on the intention of your resistance. It's easy to judge a kid screaming to turn off the TV because the moral compass there is, I want. But resistance grows in complexity as we do, doesn't it? The truth is that for everybody, sometimes we resist because our conscience calls us to speak up for the rights of others. And sometimes we resist because we want. We want to act the way we're acting without acknowledging how our actions impact other people. We want to continue getting whatever it is that we're getting without honoring its costs. Or we want to change things so that we start to get more of what we want. How do we know when we're holding the moral ground in our resistance? There are 3 questions I try to ask myself when I'm about to resist something. First, is it centered in compassion? Second, does it center the well-being of other people? And third, does it center the humanity of people? Is your resistance centered in compassion? Because everyone justifies their resistance with some kind of argument. But bad resistance is foundationally about I want. It's about domination. Whereas good resistance centers compassion. Edna Griffin's sit-in was about the inherent worth and dignity of people. I shall sit here and I will wait for you to notice that I'm a human being. I'm not going to burn down your deli. I'm not trashing you on Facebook. I will sit here immovably, though, to give you this opportunity to free yourself from your racism. Is it centered in compassion? Second, is it centered in the well-being of others? This is where the kid screaming about TV loses their moral ground. It's about I want. By contrast, Reverend Dr. King's work to build the beloved community was in spite of himself. He put himself in mortal danger every day for decades to work for the liberation of millions of people. The point was never what he wanted. It was about working to bend the moral arc of the universe towards justice. And I want us to stay on this point for a minute. Are you resisting because you want or because you're centering love for all people? It's very easy to lie to ourselves about this one. The philosopher Immanuel Kant particularly struggled with this question. When are our actions actually selfish, and when are they genuinely altruistic? I bring up Kant because he coined the phrase inherent worth and dignity of people. Kant believed that you should never treat people as a means to getting something. People were always and only ever an end to themselves. They are always inherently worthy. That is Kant's philosophy. So he struggled with this question of altruism versus selfishness, and he said, here it is. If you want to know if your action or resistance is selfish, ask if what you're doing should be the thing that everybody always does, the categorical imperative, right? Is your action something that just benefits you, or do you want everyone in the world to always do that thing? Here's a great example, that light on Belle and Fleur. I don't mind catching a very late yellow so that I don't have to sit there for 45 seconds. I don't want to wait. I just don't want you all to drive that way. That's selfish. If I'm mad at a person, if I'm mad at an organization, I might want to trash them on social media. Say, this is all bad. But I don't want to live in a world where that's how we use social media. If your resistance is fundamentally about you getting what you want, but you wouldn't want everyone to act that way, Kant says, well, you might not be resisting for liberation. Is it compassionate? Is it centering other people? And then finally, and this one you're not going to like me on, are you resisting enemies, the bad guys, bad people? Or are you still able to hold the humanity of the people you're resisting? This is where people across every political spectrum and every religious denomination really do lie to themselves. Gandhi said, I am not anti-British, but I am anti-injustice. Reverend Dr. King preached an amazing sermon on Matthew 5 about loving your enemies. Calling the president a fat Cheeto is not resistance. That's adolescent bullying. I'm deeply uninterested in his weight, but I'm very interested in his actions. The truth is that I totally get where kids come from when they are resisting to the TV. It's very, very hard for a child to stop doing the super fun thing in order to do the less fun thing. And I think if I polled you, a lot of us have a hard time turning off the TV to go to bed at night too. Beyond that, I would never want to raise a perfectly compliant child up to 18 and then send them out into the world. They would not be ready for the world. They would not be ready because it's important to push back when things are wrong. It's a moral duty. As we go through this January theme of practicing resistance, though, remembering that we are doubly cloaked in the virtue of it, cultivate some rigorous honesty with ourselves. What exactly are we resisting and why? And perhaps more importantly, how are we resisting? If my resistance worked, would it move all of us closer to the beloved community? It's a different way of thinking about the world. We live in a world that measures outcomes and results and bottom lines. And so we come here to recenter ourselves, to ask ourselves, maybe that's not the right way to measure living. Because just as a side note, 200 years from now, no one will remember us. Everything that you own will be someone else's or gone, right? All of your possessions will be redistributed. No fifth grade class will be studying the great and mighty works of me or you. Outcome-oriented thinking is essential for the productivity of what needs to get done this week, this month. But we need a community like this to remind us of the value of process-oriented thinking, how and why we do things. So we gather on Sundays and in all of our small group work to remember that it matters how and why we do things, not just that we did them. And the hard truth of the matter is only you will ever really know why you're resisting. So as we turn over this new year and begin the journey into 2026, wow, that sounds so science fiction. Let us promise ourselves radical honesty in our own hearts, because I get the sense that there's going to be a lot of times this year when we will resist. But let us have the courage to know that our resistance is grounded sometimes in I want, in I don't want to change. And let us also have the courage to be bold in our resistance when we know it is grounded in love and compassion and the flourishing of all people. When we side with love, we have the company of generations of brave Unitarian ancestors at our backs for all the saints. Let inward love guide every deed. By this we worship and are freed. May it be so. Amen.